Welcome back to my shed. I'm Paul Hopewell, and this is where I make all sorts of stuff, usually for old or classic motor vehicles or machines, and I show you what I went through to finish the project. This video is about how I went about making a chuck jaw screw for my 10-inch 4-jaw chuck. While in the process of making this screw, the one in the chuck gave out part way through making the replacement, and that meant having to swap chucks, which is never a good thing. Before I go any further, I want to thank a kindly gentleman who would very much prefer to remain anonymous, so I'll simply call him Ian. Years ago he was an engineer, a lathe operator, and he invited me over to his home to see if there was anything from his collection of old tools that I may be able to make use of. He had quite a collection, many of which I already have. However, I did find quite a few items that I certainly could put to good use. Some of these tools were used in this video. So I would like to say to Ian, thank you so much for your kind generosity. I've also temporarily remounted the sticker board, enabling me to place a sticker from Rusty, the owner of a channel called Rusty Inventions. Now here's a well chilled out character with his take on making stuff from rusty bits and bobs and turning them into useful stuff. Give his channel a bit of support. Thanks, Rusty. For those who saw my previous video, you will no doubt know that I am planning to move to pastures new when I sell. And because I have many machines and tools, I decided to pack up and prepare the machines for transport while the house is still up for sale. And now I'm getting bored, so I've decided to rebuild the machines so that I can do something. I'm telling you this because I can't be bothered to unpack all them boxes. That means I'm going to have to make do with what tools I can find. For now. Now to the project in hand. One of the chuck key screws on my 10-inch chuck has been repaired by a previous owner at some time. So, as I was sure it was to let me down one day, I thought I'd better get one made now rather than later. However, fate has a completely different set of cards to me. To start with, I prepared a bit of 40mm bar, stuffed it into the chuck and cleaned it up to reduce the diameter to about 35mm diameter. From this bar I lopped off about 2 inches for another project, perhaps for another video, and the remainder saw me having to make the screw I needed out of a section of bar 4 1/4 inches long. Now before I can do anything at all, I need to put a square hole in one end of my bit of bar, the same size as my existing chuck key. I had thought of drilling a pattern of 4 holes in one end using a small drill, then rag out the centre with a larger drill bit in the hopes that I could dress up the remainder with the shaper. But because I regularly watch and enjoy videos from the Asian subcontinent, I thought I'd have a go at forging the square hole in a similar fashion that I'd seen successfully produced. With a couple of differences. One, I don't have an acetylene torch. And I don't have a buddy that's prepared to knock 10 bells out of a bit of square bar with a 20-pound sledgehammer while I try and hold the bar end up on an anvil. All I've got is me and a propane torch, but I do have a 12-ton press and a ready-made square key in the shape of a chuck key. One other thing, the square key on my chuck key is tapered, so I don't see me having to knock a further 10 bells of the cooling bar just to get it to let go of the key after forming the hole. That's the plan, but what really happened is, well, best I show you. To start with, after cutting the bar in the bandsaw, I end and centred each end. Next, I pilot drilled for a 12.6mm drill. This is just bigger than the flaps on the key, and I sunk the hole to about 17mm deep. After satisfying myself that I had everything I needed to hand for the next bit, and before I set about making everything hot, I did a cold pressing first, just to satisfy myself that I wasn't going to get a groin full of red hot metal and the ensuing toothache that accompanied such misfortune. A cold pressing with all the pressure I could muster, the hardened chuck key got pushed in by about 2mm, leaving a nice square hole centrally in the end of the bar. With that in mind, I fired up the propane burner and started to cook the drilled and prepared end of the bar. Getting the red hot bar into the press and the key squarely in the pre-squished hole, then applying all the pressure that the press could offer before the now barely glowing metal bar got too chilled, was at best an explosion of activity. What I didn't show you was the fact that the cooling bar did in fact shrink with enough force to lock the chuck key in place. With the now well and truly dented bar back in the 4-jaw chuck, I set about truing it up. To facilitate the truing process, each corner of the square hole was assigned its own jaw, and with the use of a pointer, getting it somewhere near was a breeze. To get the bar to remain stable while it's being supported by the live centre, I needed the square hole to be round. Well, some of it anyway. This process was provided by a 60-degree cutting edge, confirmed with the aid of my depth gauge protractor. The coning process went as well as I expected, insofar as that the dead centre I used appeared to seat quite nicely. My next task was to machine the bruised and battered bar to the screw's external diameter of 0.996 inches. So I held the material by the end 3/8 inch, 10mm, and I fitted the live centre and nipped it all up. I did spend a few minutes truing up the bar near the jaws, but to be fair, it wasn't critical at this point. Before going too far, I decided to confirm that the material was cut in parallel. The finish was a bit suspect, but I was only roughing out at this time anyway. Since I made this lantern style tool holder, I have to admit that I really like using it. It's quite stable, and with all the high-speed steel inserts that I've got, it's going to be a very well used device. While everything was running tickety-boo, fate decided to roll the dice of doom, and sure enough my forfeit was a broken drive belt. As soon as the expletives had stopped echoing around the shed, I set about lacing the two halves together under a little grey cloud. This is the finishing cut, and when I checked it, there was about a 1 thou taper in it. Not bad really. With the OD done, it was time to change the cutters and to cut out the recesses. I cut the recesses first for no other reason than I needed to check the recesses with slip gauges, and it's easier to check without having to mess about between the threads. The first thing I did was to create a relief groove at 3.9 inches from the end face. The start point of the first recess is 828 thou from the end face, and it's a 1/4 of an inch wide. The next recess is 1/4 of an inch further on, and is also 1/4 of an inch wide. On the end face, I created a thread relief after identifying and marking the recess positions. Now that I'm happy with the positioning, I got on with the job of digging out the unwanted material. I did experience a little low frequency vibration, but try as I might, I just couldn't find the source. So I carried on under the assumption that it must have been my imagination. The size was spot on, so happy with that, I got on with the next one. After confirming that the two recesses were size, the next task was to reduce the central boss diameter to 793 thou. The nagging low-level vibration persisted in the background, and with that I decided to confirm that the jaws were still holding the material when I'd finished cutting the final detail in this recess. The jaws were okay, but I gave them a 1 thou squeeze just to make sure, and it was just my luck that the last jaw happened to be the one that I was replacing. That meant I had to take the job out and replace the chuck with a 3-jaw. It's not ideal, and before I could start anything I had to skim the end face diameter that had previously been between the 4 jaws to effect some sort of concentricity. After setting the lead screw for the 6 TPI that I needed for the screw, I completed a skim cut to prove the thread pitch. It was at this time that I noticed why I could hear this low-level vibration. The live centre was shaking around like it was frightened of something, because the live centre itself is a 1 Morse taper, and it was fitted into a Morse 2 taper adapter. To cut a long story short, the live centre wasn't playing ball, so I swapped it for a dead centre, and that steadied everything up again. Mind you, I was taking 5 thou deep cuts. I really need to dig out my compressor. Keeping all the muck off the workpiece is not easy with a bit of cloth or tissue paper. It leaves residue all over the place. Anyway, after a quick visit with the file and a soft brush, I slipped the jaw onto the screw and it fitted like an old shoe. All that's left for me to do now is to get rid of the excess material. I did leave a mark in the recess to indicate the screw's end face when I'd finished it. To get rid of most of it, I used the bandsaw before putting it back in the chuck. It was then a question of rag off the remainder and then skim to finish. The tool I used was what I used to refer to as a red wimmet. These red wimmets were designed to be used as a cutting tool for cast iron. I just grabbed what I could find for now. There we are, finished. But it'll need heat treating, and I'm planning on hardening this screw, but that'll have to be at a later date when I can find where I've put my mini furnace. For now, I'm going to black it using heat and boiled linseed oil. Before anybody starts giving me earache, yes, I'm using one of my homemade lapping plates. It's no good because I dropped it last week while moving stuff and it's broken. There we are, fits like a well-worn glove. Once again, thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.